Have you ever wondered what secrets hide behind closed doors in seemingly perfect families? David Mitchell was about to discover that the wife he'd trusted for 19 years had been sneaking into their 17-year-old son's room every midnight. What he captured on a hidden camera didn't just shock him. It shattered everything he thought he knew about his family. David Mitchell was a 42-year-old high school history teacher living in suburban Ohio. His wife Sarah worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and their son Jake was a quiet, studious senior preparing for college. From the outside, they looked like the perfect American family living in their beautiful four-bedroom house. But as David would soon discover, those walls held secrets that would change their lives forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, you need to do something right now. If you love these real-life family stories that could happen to anyone, hit that subscribe button immediately. Seriously, take 2 seconds and click it. These stories take hours to research and share with you, and your subscription helps bring you more amazing content like this. Also, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in New York, Australia, maybe Brazil? Let me know. Your engagement means everything. Now, let's get back to this story that's about to blow your mind. It started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. David had been having trouble sleeping lately due to work stress. Around midnight, he woke up thirsty and headed downstairs for water. As he passed Jake's room, he noticed the door was slightly ajar, and he could hear whispers. Soft, urgent whispers. His heart jumped. Was Jake on the phone with a girlfriend? As a father, he worried, but he also wanted to respect his son's privacy. David was about to continue to the kitchen when he heard Sarah's voice. His wife, inside their son's room, at midnight. He froze in the hallway, his bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The whispers continued for a few more minutes. Then he heard movement. Quickly, David ducked into the guest bathroom and waited. Through the crack in the door, he watched Sarah emerge from Jake's room, carefully closing the door behind her. She looked both ways down the hallway, like she was checking if anyone saw her, before tiptoeing back to their bedroom. David's mind raced. Why would Sarah sneak into Jake's room at midnight? And why did she look so secretive about it? He tried to brush it off. Maybe Jake was sick. Maybe he'd asked her for medicine or needed to talk about something. But the way she'd checked the hallway, the way she'd moved so carefully, it didn't sit right with him. The next morning at breakfast, David watched them both carefully. Jake picked at his pancakes, quieter than usual. He'd always been an introverted kid, but lately he seemed even more withdrawn. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he barely looked up from his plate. "You okay, champ?" David asked, trying to sound casual. Jake nodded without meeting his eyes. "Yeah, Dad, just tired. Lots of homework." Sarah jumped in quickly. "College applications are stressful, honey. Jake's been working so hard." She gave David a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Right," David said slowly, watching her pour more orange juice into Jake's glass with shaking hands. That night, David made a point to stay awake. At 11:47 p.m., he heard the bedroom door creak open. Sarah slipped out of bed, and David kept his eyes closed, listening to her footsteps pad down the hallway. A few minutes later, he heard Jake's door open and close softly. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. For the next 4 nights, the same thing happened. Around midnight, Sarah would leave their bed and spend 15 to 20 minutes in Jake's room. Every morning, they both acted like nothing was wrong, but David could feel the tension at breakfast, thick enough to cut with a knife. David's imagination went wild. Was Jake in trouble? Drugs? Was he being bullied and Sarah was hiding it from him? Worse thoughts crept in, thoughts he hated himself for having. What if something inappropriate was happening? No, he couldn't even entertain that. Sarah was a loving mother. But then why all the secrecy? David tried confronting Sarah on Friday night. "Hey, is everything okay with Jake?" he asked as they got ready for bed. "Of course," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Why do you ask?" "He just seems off lately, distant. It's senior year, David. He's stressed about college, about leaving home. It's normal." She kissed his cheek and climbed into bed, ending the conversation. But David knew it wasn't normal, and he knew Sarah was lying to him. That weekend, David made a decision. He didn't want to spy on his own family, but he needed to know what was happening in his house. On Monday morning, after Sarah left for her shift at the hospital and Jake went to school, David drove to an electronics store 30 minutes away, far enough that he wouldn't run into anyone he knew. "I need a small, discreet security camera," David told the young sales clerk. "For home security?" the clerk asked. "Something like that," David replied, his stomach churning with guilt. The clerk showed him several options, and David settled on a tiny camera with night vision and motion detection that could connect to his phone. His hands trembled as he paid cash. He didn't want this purchase showing up on their joint credit card statement. That afternoon, while the house was empty, David installed the camera on Jake's bookshelf, hidden behind a row of textbooks. It had a clear view of the door and most of the room. He tested it on his phone. The image was crystal clear, even in the dark. David felt sick doing this. What kind of father spies on his family? But what kind of husband lets his wife sneak around in the middle of the night without answers? That night, David lay in bed with his phone under his pillow, waiting. At 11:52 p.m., he felt Sarah shift beside him. The motion detection alert buzzed silently on his phone. He watched as she got up and left the room. David's phone screen glowed in the darkness. He opened the app with shaking hands. The night vision showed Jake's room in eerie green and black. The door opened and Sarah entered. Jake was sitting up in bed, and even through the grainy footage, David could see tears on his face. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into a hug. Jake clung to her like a small child, his shoulders shaking with sobs. They were talking, but the camera had no audio. David watched as Sarah wiped Jake's tears, stroked his hair, and rocked him gently. This went on for 18 minutes. Finally, she laid him back down, kissed his forehead, and left the room. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm enjoying this story." Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. David was more confused than ever. His son was clearly in emotional distress. But why was Sarah hiding this from him? Why didn't she tell him Jake was struggling? Why meet in secret in the middle of the night? The next night, the same thing happened, and the night after that. Each time, David watched through his phone as Sarah comforted their crying son. It was breaking his heart, not just to see Jake in pain, but to realize he'd been completely shut out of whatever crisis his family was facing. On Thursday night, David couldn't take it anymore. When Sarah got out of bed at midnight, he waited exactly 2 minutes. Then he got up and walked straight to Jake's room. He didn't knock. He just opened the door. They both froze. Sarah was sitting on Jake's bed, holding him, and Jake's face was buried in her shoulder. The lamp on his nightstand cast long shadows across the room, making the scene look almost surreal. "David!" Sarah gasped, pulling away from Jake. "Dad," Jake whispered, his voice broken and small. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" David's voice came out harder than he intended. "I've been watching you two sneak around for weeks now." Sarah's face went pale. "You've been watching us?" "Every night, Sarah. Every single night you leave our bed to come in here. And nobody thinks I deserve to know why?" Jake looked down at his hands, tears streaming down his face. Sarah stood up, positioning herself between David and Jake, like she was protecting their son. From him, his father. "David, please." "No," David cut her off. "I'm done with the secrets. I'm done being shut out of my own family. What is happening?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Jake's quiet sobs were the only sound in the room. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath, and David could see her hands trembling. "Sit down, David," she said softly. "We need to talk." David sat down in Jake's desk chair, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. Sarah remained standing, her arms wrapped around herself like she was physically holding herself together. "Jake," she said gently, turning to their son. "Do you want to tell him, or should I?" Jake looked up, his eyes red and swollen from crying. He looked so young in that moment, so vulnerable, that David's anger began to dissolve into something else. Fear. Something was really deeply wrong. "I'll tell him," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. He took a shaky breath, and David leaned forward, his entire body tense with anticipation. Dad, I've been having panic attacks. Of all the things David had imagined over the past weeks, drugs, bullying, depression, even worse scenarios he didn't want to name, this wasn't it. Panic attacks? Since when? Since September, maybe longer, I don't know. Jake wiped his eyes with his sleeve, leaving wet streaks across his face. They happen at night mostly. I wake up and I can't breathe, and my heart is racing, and I feel like I'm dying. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a heart attack. I was terrified. Sarah sat back down on the bed, taking Jake's hand in hers. He came to me after the third one. He was terrified, David. He didn't know what was happening to him, and he was scared. Why didn't you tell me? David looked between them, hurt flooding through him like ice water. Why would you keep this from me? Because I asked her not to, Jake said quickly, his voice rising with emotion. Dad, you don't understand. You're always so strong, so put together. You handle everything perfectly. I didn't want you to think I was weak. David felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Weak? Jake, you're my son. You could never be weak to me. How could you think that? But you don't get it. Jake's voice cracked and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. You're the guy who ran a marathon last year while training for it after work. You teach 5 classes a day and coach the debate team and never complain about anything. You wake up at 5 a.m. to work out before school. You never seem stressed or anxious or scared of anything. And here I am, completely falling apart over college applications and the future and just everything. I feel like I'm drowning, Dad, and you're like this superhero who never struggles with anything. David sat there, completely stunned. Is that really how his son saw him? As some unbreakable figure he couldn't relate to? As someone who had it all together all the time? The realization hit him hard. He'd been so focused on being strong for his family that he'd made his own son feel like he couldn't be vulnerable around him. Sarah spoke softly, her voice thick with emotion. The panic attacks got worse over the last month. He'd wake up at midnight like clockwork, unable to breathe, his heart racing. So I started staying awake, waiting for it. When I heard him get up or make any sound of distress, I'd come in and help him through it. I'd use the breathing techniques I learned in nursing school. Hold him, talk him down until he could calm down enough to try to sleep again. Why didn't you wake me up? David asked, his voice breaking. Why did you handle this alone? I'm his father, Sarah. I had a right to know my son was suffering. Because Jake begged me not to, Sarah said, and David could see tears in her eyes now too. And I thought I was doing the right thing, respecting his wishes, being the parent he felt safe with. But David, I was wrong. I see that now. I should have told you. I should have insisted we face this together as a family. Jake was crying harder now, his whole body shaking. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to shut you out. I look at you and I see everything I'm supposed to be, and I'm nowhere close to that. You're confident and strong and brave, and I'm scared of everything. I'm scared of going to college. I'm scared of leaving home. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared that I'll disappoint you. David felt his own eyes burning with tears. He moved from the chair to sit on Jake's other side, and without thinking, he pulled his son into his arms. Jake collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder, and David held him tight, the way he used to when Jake was little and had nightmares. Listen to me, David said, his voice thick with emotion. You could never disappoint me. Never. And Jake, I need you to know something. I'm not the superhero you think I am. I'm scared too, all the time. Jake pulled back slightly, looking at his father with confusion. What? No, you're not. You're never scared. That's not true, David said, wiping his own eyes. I'm terrified half the time. I'm scared I'm not a good enough teacher. I'm scared I'm not providing enough for this family. I wake up at night worried about money, about your future, about whether I'm being a good father. That marathon you mentioned? I almost quit 6 times during training because I was afraid of failing and looking stupid. I just didn't show you those parts of me because I thought I had to be strong for you and your mom. Sarah reached over and squeezed David's hand. We've both been trying so hard to be strong for you, Jake, that we forgot to show you it's okay to not be strong all the time. But everyone else seems to have it together, Jake said quietly. All my friends are excited about college. They're applying to Ivy League schools and talking about their futures like they can't wait. And I'm paralyzed. Every time I think about leaving home, about being on my own, about having to figure out who I am and what I want to do with my life, I feel like I can't breathe. David felt a surge of recognition. Jake, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Not even your mom. Both Jake and Sarah looked at him with surprise. When I went to college, David continued, I had panic attacks too. Severe ones. My roommate found me hyperventilating in our dorm room more than once. I was so homesick and so scared that I almost dropped out 3 times freshman year. I called my parents crying, begging to come home. But they lived in California, and we didn't have money for plane tickets, so I had to stick it out. You did? Jake's eyes were wide. But you never told me that. You always talk about college like it was the best time of your life. It was eventually, David said, but the beginning was hell. And I never told you because I didn't want to scare you. I wanted you to be excited about college, not afraid of it. But that was wrong. I should have been honest with you about my struggles so you'd know it's normal to be scared. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm enjoying this story. Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. Sarah spoke up. I think we've all been trying to protect each other, and instead we've been isolating ourselves. David, you should have told me you were having panic attacks in college. Jake, you should have told your father about yours. And I should have insisted we deal with this as a family from the start, not just handled it secretly in the middle of the night. They sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of all these revelations hanging in the air. Finally, David spoke again. Jake, have you talked to anyone professional about this? A therapist or counselor? Jake shook his head. No, Mom wanted me to, but I was afraid. I didn't want anyone to know. What if it got on my record or something? What if colleges found out and didn't accept me because they thought I was mentally unstable? That's not how it works, Sarah said gently. Therapy is confidential, and seeking help for anxiety isn't a weakness, Jake. It's actually one of the strongest things you can do. David nodded. Your mom's right, and I think maybe all 3 of us could benefit from talking to someone. We clearly have communication issues as a family, and there's no shame in getting professional help to work through them. Really? Jake looked surprised. You'd go to therapy? If it means helping you and improving our family, absolutely, David said firmly. Jake, you're the most important thing in the world to me. Your well-being matters more than my ego or any outdated ideas about what makes someone strong or weak. Jake broke down crying again, but this time it seemed different, like a release of pressure that had been building for months. I've been so scared, Dad. So scared. And I didn't know how to tell you because I thought you'd be disappointed in me. Never, David said fiercely, holding his son tight again. You hear me? Never. I am so proud of you, Jake. You're smart, kind, compassionate, and brave. Yes, brave. Dealing with panic attacks every night and still getting up every day to go to school and do your work, that takes incredible courage. Sarah moved closer, wrapping her arms around both of them. For the first time in weeks, David felt like they were actually a family again, united instead of fractured by secrets and misunderstandings. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to tell you, Jake said to David. I'm sorry I made Mom keep it secret. I'm sorry I didn't create an environment where you felt safe telling me, David replied. And I'm sorry I've apparently been walking around like some stoic robot who never struggles with anything. That changes now. From now on, we're honest with each other, all of us. Deal? Deal, Jake said. Deal, Sarah echoed. They stayed there in Jake's room for another hour just talking. David and Sarah told Jake about their own anxieties and fears, the times they'd struggled, failed, felt overwhelmed. David told stories from his teaching career about lessons that went horribly wrong, about times he'd embarrassed himself in front of students, about the constant imposter syndrome he felt, wondering if he was actually any good at his job. Sarah shared her experiences at the hospital, about the nights she came home crying after losing a patient, about the anxiety she felt every time she had to perform a difficult procedure, about the therapy she'd gone to in her 20s for work-related stress. With each story, David watched Jake's face relax a little more. He could see the realization dawning in his son's eyes. His parents weren't perfect. They were human. They struggled too. And that made it okay for Jake to struggle. "So what do we do now?" Jake asked finally. I still have panic attacks. They're not just going to go away because we talked." "No, they won't," Sarah said. "But now we face them together. Tomorrow, we make an appointment with a therapist. We find someone who specializes in anxiety disorders in teenagers, and we work through this as a family. And in the meantime," David added, "if you wake up at midnight with a panic attack, you wake me up too, not just Mom. Both of us. We're a team, and we're going to get through this together." "But Dad, you have to teach in the morning. I don't want to keep you up." "Jake, look at me," David said seriously. "You are more important than sleep. You are more important than work. You are more important than anything else in my life. If you need me at midnight, at 3 a.m., whenever, you wake me up. Promise me." Jake nodded, fresh tears sliding down his face. "I promise." "Good," David said, pulling him close again. "And one more thing. I'm going to do better at showing you my own struggles and fears. No more pretending I have it all together. Deal?" "Deal," Jake said, a small smile finally appearing on his tear-streaked face. As they finally said goodnight, and David and Sarah returned to their bedroom, David felt emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter. The secrets were out. The truth was exposed. And while they had a long road ahead of them in helping Jake through his anxiety, at least now they were walking it together. "I'm sorry," Sarah said as they climbed back into bed. "I should have told you from the beginning." "I'm sorry too," David replied. "I should have been more approachable. I should have shown Jake and you that it's okay to not be okay." They lay there in the darkness, holding hands. "We're going to get through this," Sarah whispered. "Yes," David agreed. "We are." The next morning was a Saturday, and David woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in weeks. No more secrets, no more pretending. Today, they started fixing things. Over breakfast, pancakes, Jake's favorite, David broached the subject that had been on his mind. "So, I was thinking, why don't we all call out of our responsibilities today and spend it together? Sarah, can you see if someone can cover your shift? And Jake, your homework can wait one day." Jake looked surprised but pleased. "Really? Just hang out as a family?" "Really," David confirmed. "I think we need it. What do you say?" Sarah smiled, already reaching for her phone. "I'll call the hospital." After a few phone calls, their Saturday was cleared. David suggested they go for a hike at the state park 20 minutes away, something they used to do regularly when Jake was younger but hadn't done in years. As they walked the familiar trails, David made a conscious effort to be more open. When they reached a steep incline, instead of powering through it like he normally would, he stopped halfway up, breathing hard. "Man, I'm out of shape," he said, leaning against a tree. Jake looked at him with surprise. "Dad, you work out every morning." "Yeah, but apparently not enough," David laughed. "Getting old is rough, kiddo. My knees hurt, I'm winded from a hill that wouldn't have fazed me 10 years ago, and I'm pretty sure I pulled something in my back getting out of bed this morning." It was a small thing, but David saw Jake relax a little. His invincible father wasn't so invincible after all. They had lunch at a diner they'd frequented when Jake was little. Over burgers and milkshakes, Sarah brought up the topic of therapy. "I did some research last night," she said, pulling out her phone. "There's a therapist about 15 minutes from here who specializes in anxiety and panic disorders in teens and young adults. Dr. Rebecca Martinez. She has excellent reviews, and she's taking new patients." Jake picked at his fries nervously. "What if I don't know what to say to her? What if she thinks I'm just being dramatic?" "Then she's not a good therapist and we'll find someone else," David said firmly. "But Jake, I don't think you're being dramatic. What you're experiencing is real and valid. Panic attacks are a medical condition, not a character flaw. Your dad's right, Sarah added, and therapy isn't about having all the answers. It's about having a safe space to figure things out with someone who's trained to help you. Jake was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll try it. But can one of you come with me, at least to the first appointment? Of course, David and Sarah said in unison. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm enjoying this story. Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. That evening, they watched a movie together, something else they hadn't done as a family in months. Halfway through, David's phone buzzed with a work email. Normally, he'd check it immediately, but this time he silenced his phone and set it face down on the coffee table. Everything okay? Sarah asked. Just work, David said. It can wait. This is more important. He saw Jake glance at him with a small smile. That night, at 11:30 p.m., David woke up naturally. He lay there for a moment, then got out of bed quietly. Where are you going? Sarah whispered. To check on Jake, David replied softly. He walked down the hall and gently pushed open Jake's door. His son was asleep, breathing peacefully. David stood there for a moment, just watching him, feeling a wave of love and protectiveness wash over him. He was about to leave when Jake stirred and opened his eyes. Dad? Hey, buddy, just checking on you. Go back to sleep. I'm okay, Jake said groggily. No panic attack tonight. That's great, David said, smiling. But remember, if you do have one, you wake me up. Promise? I promise, Jake said, already drifting back to sleep. David returned to bed feeling more peaceful than he had in weeks. Maybe they were going to be okay after all. The following Monday, they had their first appointment with Dr. Martinez. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. She met with Jake alone for the first 45 minutes, then invited David and Sarah in for the last 15. Jake has agreed to let me share some things with you, Dr. Martinez said. First, I want you to know that what he's experiencing is very common. Anxiety disorders affect millions of teenagers, especially during major life transitions like senior year of high school. The good news is that with proper treatment, which usually includes a combination of therapy and sometimes medication, most people see significant improvement. Medication? David asked, concerned. It's an option we can explore if therapy alone isn't enough, Dr. Martinez explained. But let's start with cognitive behavioral therapy and see how Jake responds. I'd like to see him weekly for now. Over the next several weeks, David watched his son slowly start to improve. The panic attacks didn't disappear overnight, but they became less frequent and less severe. More importantly, Jake seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of keeping his struggles secret. David and Sarah also started seeing a couples therapist to work on their own communication issues. It wasn't easy. There were uncomfortable revelations about how they'd both been hiding things from each other, not just about Jake, but about their own stresses and fears. I've felt so alone in this marriage sometimes, Sarah admitted during one session. You're always so focused on being the provider, the strong one, that I sometimes feel like I can't share when I'm struggling because I don't want to add to your burden. David was stunned. Sarah, you're not a burden. You're my partner. I want to know when you're struggling. But you never show when you're struggling, Sarah said. So how am I supposed to feel comfortable showing you my struggles? It was a painful realization, but an important one. David had been so focused on being strong for his family that he'd inadvertently made them feel like they couldn't be vulnerable around him. Things began to change in the Mitchell household. David started being more open about his bad days at work, his frustrations, his fears. Sarah started speaking up when she needed help or support instead of shouldering everything alone. And Jake slowly started opening up more about his feelings and anxieties. One night in early December, David came home from work looking stressed. Jake was at the kitchen table doing homework. Rough day, Dad? Jake asked. David paused. His instinct was to say, it's fine, and move on. But that was the old David. The new David took a breath and said, yeah, actually, really rough. One of my students accused me of grading unfairly, and it escalated to a meeting with the principal. I feel terrible, even though the principal sided with me. I keep wondering if I did something wrong." Jake looked at his father with understanding. "That sounds really stressful. I'm sorry." "Thanks, bud," David said, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "It helps to talk about it." "I know," Jake said with a knowing smile. "That's what Dr. Martinez keeps telling me." David laughed. "She's a smart woman." If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm enjoying this story." Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. By mid-December, Jake had narrowed down his college choices to 3 schools, all within 2 hours of home. During a family dinner, he shared his decision. "I know everyone expects me to go to some prestigious school far away," Jake said nervously. "But I think I need to stay closer to home, at least for undergrad. I'm not ready to be across the country." David felt a flicker of worry. Was Jake limiting himself because of his anxiety? But before he could say anything, Sarah spoke up. "Jake, what matters is that you're making a choice that's right for you, not what everyone else expects. If staying closer to home feels right, then that's what you should do." "Dad?" Jake looked at David anxiously. David took a moment to really think about his response. "Jake, I think your mom's right. A year ago, I might have pushed you to consider schools further away because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Leave home, be independent, have the college experience. But I've learned a lot these past few months. There's no one right way to do anything. If you're going to thrive closer to home, then that's the best choice for you. You can always transfer later if you want, or go far away for grad school. Life isn't a race." Jake's face lit up with relief. "Really? You're not disappointed?" "Not even a little bit," David said honestly. "I'm proud of you for knowing yourself well enough to make the choice that's right for you, regardless of what anyone else might think." That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Sarah curled up next to David on the couch. "You handled that really well," she said. "I meant it," David replied. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about expectations. The ones I put on Jake, the ones I put on myself, the ones I put on you. I think I've been so caught up in having a certain vision of what our family should look like that I forgot to appreciate what our family actually is." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, I had this idea that I had to be the strong, silent provider type, that Jake should be outgoing and confident and excited about leaving home, that we should all have it together all the time. But that's not real life. Real life is messy and complicated, and people struggle, and that's okay. That's normal." Sarah smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'm glad you figured that out, even if it took a hidden camera and a midnight confrontation to get there." David laughed. "Yeah, not my finest moment, installing a spy camera in my son's room. But it led to something good," Sarah said. "Sometimes you have to break before you can heal." On Christmas morning, David woke up early, not to work out, but to make breakfast for his family. As he stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. His relationship with Jake was stronger than ever. They talked now, really talked, about everything from school stress to fears about the future to Jake's therapy sessions. David had even shared some of his own anxiety with Jake, and they'd bonded over having similar struggles. His marriage with Sarah felt renewed. They'd started having weekly check-in dates where they talked openly about their feelings, their stresses, their needs. No more assumptions, no more hiding. And David himself felt different, lighter, more authentic. He'd stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. He still worked out in the mornings, but he also didn't beat himself up if he skipped a day because he was tired. He still worked hard at his job, but he also left work at work most days instead of bringing it home. He still wanted to be strong for his family, but he'd learned that real strength included vulnerability. Jake came downstairs in his pajamas, looking sleepy but happy. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Those pancakes smell amazing." "Merry Christmas, son," David replied, sliding a stack onto a plate. "How'd you sleep?" "Good, actually. No panic attacks in over a week." "That's great, Jake. Really great." Sarah appeared a moment later, and they sat down together for breakfast. As David looked around the table at his family, imperfect, struggling, but together and honest, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. "I want to say something," David said, and Sarah and Jake looked at him. "I know this year has been hard, really hard, but I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that everything came to light, even though the way it happened wasn't ideal. I'm grateful that we're learning to be honest with each other, and I'm grateful for both of you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I don't say that enough." Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. Jake looked down at his plate, clearly emotional. "I'm grateful too," Jake said quietly. "I know I put you guys through a lot, but I feel like we're actually a family now, you know? Like a real family that talks about real things instead of just pretending everything's fine all the time." "That's exactly what we are," Sarah said, "and I'm grateful for that too, for both of you, for our messy, imperfect, honest, real family." They spent Christmas Day together, playing board games, watching movies, and just being present with each other. No phones, no work, no distractions, just family. That night, as David and Sarah were getting ready for bed, David noticed the hidden camera was still on Jake's shelf, buried behind books where his son had never discovered it. "I should probably remove that," David said, pointing to it. "Probably," Sarah agreed, "though in a weird way, I'm glad you put it there. It forced us to confront what we'd been avoiding." "Still feel guilty about it, though," David admitted. "We all made mistakes," Sarah said. "What matters is that we learned from them." David nodded, making a mental note to remove the camera the next day. He didn't need it anymore. His family wasn't hiding anything from him now. As he lay in bed that night, David's mind drifted to that night weeks ago, when he'd first seen Sarah sneaking into Jake's room. He'd been so scared, so angry, so hurt. He'd imagined the worst. But the truth, that his son was struggling with anxiety and his wife was trying to help, had been both heartbreaking and ultimately healing. Life hadn't become perfect. Jake still had panic attacks sometimes. David still struggled with work stress. Sarah still felt overwhelmed with her job at the hospital. But they faced these challenges together now, as a team, with honesty and openness. And that, David realized, was what made a family strong. Not the absence of problems, but the willingness to face them together. 3 months later, Jake received his college acceptance letters. He chose a state university 90 minutes from home, close enough to come home on weekends if he needed to, far enough to have his own independence. "Are you excited?" David asked him the day they paid the enrollment deposit. "Yeah," Jake said, and David could see he meant it. "I mean, I'm still nervous, but Dr. Martinez and I have been working on coping strategies, and knowing that you and Mom are just a phone call away makes it feel less scary." "We're always just a phone call away," David assured him, "or a drive away, whatever you need." "I know," Jake said, "and that makes all the difference." As David watched his son walk away, heading upstairs to tell his friends the news, he felt a wave of pride. Not because Jake was going to college, though that was wonderful, but because Jake had faced his fears, asked for help, and was learning to manage his anxiety in healthy ways. That night, after Jake had gone to bed, David and Sarah sat on their back porch, looking at the stars. "Remember that night you caught me sneaking out of Jake's room?" Sarah asked. "How could I forget?" David laughed. "I thought my whole world was falling apart." "In a way it did," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but something better was built in its place." David nodded. "Yeah, something real, something honest." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. "You know," David said eventually, "I've been thinking, maybe I should talk to some of my students about mental health. Not preach or anything, just be open about the fact that it's okay to struggle, that asking for help is strength, not weakness." "I think that's a great idea," Sarah said. "Kids need to hear that from adults they respect." "Maybe I'll start a mental health awareness club at school," David mused. "Get students talking about these issues." "You should," Sarah encouraged. "You could make a real difference." David smiled. A few months ago, he would have been too worried about appearing weak or vulnerable to do something like that. But now? Now he understood that his struggles, his imperfections, his humanity, these weren't weaknesses. They were what made him relatable, what made him real, and that, he realized, was the most valuable thing he could share with anyone, especially young people like his students, who were navigating their own challenges and feeling like they had to have it all together. The stars twinkled overhead, and David felt at peace. The journey wasn't over. Healing never really is, but they were on the right path, together, and that was all that mattered. This story reminds us all that families are strongest not when they pretend to be perfect, but when they're honest about their struggles. David, Sarah, and Jake learned that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the foundation of real connection. Whether you're a parent, a teenager, or somewhere in between, remember that it's okay to not be okay. Asking for help is brave. Being honest about your feelings is courageous. And the people who truly love you want to support you through your struggles, not just celebrate your successes. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below about what lesson resonated most with you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and remember, you're never alone in your struggles.